Okay. Happy February 13th, everyone. My name is Logan Noel Andrus. I'm WSSDA's Director of Strategic Advocacy. And with me today is Cynthia Tamayo, WSSDA's Legislative Policy Specialist. And we are here to share some legislative updates with you on this Friday afternoon of week 5 of the 2026 legislative session. Before we get started, just want to remind folks that if you have questions for Cynthia or I anytime during our presentation today, to please use the Q&A box, and we'll be happy to either address those live or address those in writing. And if we get questions that we don't have the answers to in this moment, we'll be happy to get back to you. All right, you are pretty used to this agenda for now, but just wanted to orient you to how we're going to spend our time today. We want to share a little bit about the Leadership WSSDA cohort that we got to spend time with on campus this morning. We'll look at weeks 4 and 5 in review, give you some updates on what's been happening around here at the Capitol, share what we know about week 6, remind you of what resources we have to support you, and close us out. So with that, just want to let you all know and share that we had a lovely morning this morning with the 2026 Leadership WSSDA class. This weekend is their first sort of programming together. As a reminder, Leadership WSSDA is a program offered by our organization that's essentially a leadership development training program for school directors. And the 2026 cohort was with us. Cynthia and I hosted them at the Capitol this morning alongside our leadership development staff team. And during that time, we got to talk through sort of some advocacy training. We got to talk with some legislators face to face. Our legislators are very busy on the floor right now, but we were able to pull Representative April Berg, who's a former school director, active WSSDA member, WSSDA Legislative Committee member, out to come and talk to folks this morning, which was lovely. Cynthia and I took them on a tour of Capitol campus. And during that time, we sort of ran into Lieutenant Governor Denny Heck, who recognized us right away and spent about 15 minutes just chatting it up with members of the cohort, asking some questions, letting them ask him some questions. That was lovely. And then we all just spent some time over in the House gallery watching floor debate, as that is what legislators are very busy doing during this time of the session. And right before we got up to head out, because they had to get going and so did we, the legislature was debating the isolation and restraint bill on the House floor. So anyway, just want to share that we had a lovely morning with that crew, and we'll share some pictures of our time together in InSession, the written update later today. All right, so as we think about weeks 4 and 5 in review, just want to dive in and let you know that we've had a couple of cutoff dates since we've last been together. And as a reminder, the cutoff dates that we're about to talk about are self-imposed by the legislature, and they each mean something a little bit different. So we'll dive into each one. On February 4th, during week 4 of session, we experienced the policy committee cutoff. And what that meant is that any bill that did not make its way through its original policy committee was considered no longer moving. During week 5 on February 9th, we had a similar cutoff. However, this was for fiscal committees. So essentially any bill that didn't make its way through its fiscal committee, thinking about the Appropriations Committee, the Capital Budget Committee, the Ways and Means Committee, and the Senate, there was an additional deadline by which a large number of bills sort of were labeled inactive at that time. What that means for our bill watch list at WSSDA is that the number of bills that we are tracking has significantly decreased since we've last been together. I believe our bill watch had over 100 bills on it the last time we had InSession Live, and as of now, we are down to 64 bills on our bill watch list. The other thing I would just note for you all about cutoff dates is that any bill that is subject to the budget or tied to the budget in any kind of way, we refer to those as necessary to implement the budget, or NTIB. You might hear us reference that acronym. Any bill that might have that designation on it is not subject to any particular cutoff. So this is what we know as of right now in terms of bills that have made their way through. We have 64 that we're continuing to monitor. Wanted to share a couple of key bills that are still sort of in action and have momentum that we want to put on your radar. These are the ones we are most closely watching and engaging with at this time. The first is House Bill 2257 and the Senate companion, Senate Bill 6113. These bills are the ones that would essentially clean up and address unintended consequences of last year's Senate Bill 5814, particularly for schools and public education. That would be the sales tax on temporary services, as well as live presentations. Over the course of week 5, each of these bills had an amendment that included a full K through 12 exemption from the taxes that have been added on. So we are continuing to watch and engage in those bills. We anticipate both of those to come to the House and Senate floor for review and debate in the coming days. Right now, both of those bills are sitting in the rules committees for the respective House and Senate bills. Additionally, House Bill 1795, that is the bill on the topic of isolation and restraint. That bill actually is on the House floor, likely right now. It was as we were walking out of the House chambers just about 15 minutes ago. There are a number of amendments being proposed to that bill that are being debated right now that will possibly be added to the bill. We'll be continuing to watch that one and engage with it as it moves over to the Senate, but want to let you know that that bill is continuing to move. Additionally, there are 2 sort of commission and work group bills that we've talked about in this space in the past. One is House Bill 2636. That is the bill that would create a performance funding and operations review commission for K through 12 education that would essentially be taking a look at the 28A RCW and making recommendations to JLARC. That is the Joint Legislative Audit and Review Commission, excuse me. It's basically the legislature's independent research arm that's nonpartisan to do some research and reporting as to essentially how we can review and clean up the 28A RCW. House Bill 2661 creates a public records modernization work group to essentially address sort of all of the different things that schools and others are having to navigate as it relates to public records requests. This work group and this conversation in this bill is much larger than just education. So this involves multiple sectors. And for the case of this work group, there is one sort of identified representative to represent the K through 12 education perspective and conversation. And that member, as the bill currently sits, would be a member identified by WSSDA, the School Administrators Association. Finally, want to flag for you Senate Bill 6247. That is the School District Financial Management bill by Senator Dozier. We are watching and engaging that one in particular because of the school board training requirements that are included there. This bill passed off the Senate floor yesterday evening. And this bill, as you've heard us say previously, would create a one-time training requirement for school directors within their first 2 years of elected service to take funding and finance training through WSSDA. That training at this time would be funded by the state and therefore offered to school directors at no cost. So those are some of the key bills that we are continuing to track and engage with. That is not 64 bills, so there are more, but just wanted to run through a couple of highlights with you today. In terms of sort of the big picture, where we're at with our WSSDA priorities, There were a couple of bills that we have been really working hard on, including the MSOC funding bill as well as the Transportation Safety Net bill. Both of those bills did not make it past their respective fiscal cutoffs last week. So neither of those bills is continuing to move at this time. However, we are still continuing to talk with legislators about the importance of these issues. Um, we talked earlier about the sales tax exemption bill. That bill is still continuing to move. We spoke about that. And then finally, our work to remove unfunded mandates from bills is definitely still ongoing. WASA, WASDA, and WASBO sent a letter to legislative leaders earlier this week that'll be linked in our InSession written publication later today, essentially communicating to leadership that a very similar message that we've been communicating for the entirety of session about no new school year requirements, especially those that are unfunded. We added additional context this time to remind the legislature that, you know, that they are not moving the MSOC bill at this point in time. They're not funding the Transportation Safety Net bill at this time. Just sort of that much more justification and reason for the legislature to press pause on any bills that contain new school year requirements, especially those that are unfunded. So wanted to share those updates with you as well. As we look ahead at week 6, a couple of things that we would pull out for you is that there will be no committee hearings ahead of Tuesday. So February 17th, that would be Tuesday, is the floor action House of Origin deadline. So what that means is that the legislature will be in session very late tonight, tomorrow, possibly Sunday, all of Monday, all of Tuesday, debating bills as full House and Senate respective bodies. They'll be in sort of that final crunch time because February 17th at 5 p.m. is the deadline by which all bills that are going to continue to move need to be discussed on their respective House or Senate floor, as in their full body discussion, and then passed by that time. Next week, there will be policy committee hearings on Wednesday and Thursday and Friday. However, many of those schedules have not yet been released. So we do not have any information at this time as of which bills will be heard in which areas. But given that bills will be sort of passed through their House of Origin or Chamber of Origin, what that means is that when we tap back into policy committees next week, the House will be engaging Senate bills and the Senate will be engaging House bills. So bills will be in what we refer to as their opposite chamber to essentially repeat the same process that they've been going through over the last 4 to 5 weeks in their original chamber. Additionally, next week, for anyone who registered for the legislative conference and attended that earlier this January, we'll be working with WASA and WASBO to host our mid-session webinar. That webinar will be on February 17th at noon, and again is available for all legislative conference registrants. You should have received a Zoom-related email link generated from our colleagues at WASA either yesterday or the day before, reminding you of that event and putting that Zoom link back at the top of your inbox. If you have not received such an email and you'd like to participate in the webinar, please don't hesitate to reach out to Cynthia and I. We'll be happy to help you get that link. But February 17th at noon will be that webinar available for any legislative conference registrants. Finally, as we think about week 6, we are, as you have heard us say, continuing to talk and learn with legislators about what their plans might be for their respective House and Senate proposed operating budgets. And we are sort of going to be in final preparation mode for budget release that could happen in week 6 or possibly week 7. The most important thing for you to know on that front right now is that we'll be waiting for sort of one final revenue forecast update that'll be coming out during week 6. After that time, legislators will sort of move into their final phase of budget preparation. The other thing that's important to know about this stage of budgets is you might remember at the beginning of session, the original budgets that we've seen so far have been governor proposed operating budgets. And what that meant for us is that the governor's proposed operating budget was heard in both the House and the Senate. Meaning our testimony in both committees, the House Appropriations Committee, the Senate Ways and Means Committee, and the House Capital Budget Committee, was essentially all the same because both chambers had received the same budget proposal, being one proposal coming from the governor's office. At this point in time, as the legislature prepares to release their budgets, there will be different and separate proposals. For example, the House will release its own budget proposal and the Senate will release its own budget proposal, each of which will have similarities and differences. So we will have multiple budgets to be taking a look at, reviewing, and giving testimony on over the next couple of weeks. And we anticipate those budgets either at the very tail end of week 6 or more likely during week 7, but we'll be preparing for those releases next week. As I sort of stated earlier, the House and Senate will be on the floor debating bills for many hours between now and Tuesday's deadline called the House of Origin Cutoff. Last night, the House ended after 10 p.m. They referred to that as a late night, and the rumor around campus is that tonight will be a late night. So the House and Senate will definitely be doing their work on the floor in their full bodies to be passing bills. We will be monitoring and engaging in that work basically every day between now and Tuesday to sort of make sure that the bills that are moving in the best way possible, or at least that we're communicating our perspectives on that. And we'll continue to keep you apprised of which bills are moving, which ones are not moving, and where and when we need your direct advocacy to either make sure that a bill continues to move or help us to make sure that bills do not continue to move. We will also keep you apprised over the weekend as we continue to learn about which bills will be heard in which policy committees next week. As of right now, the committee hearings have been scheduled and the agendas say bills TBD. And that's usual, that's typical. Those agendas will be filled in as soon as more bills get passed off their respective House and Senate floors. All right, and before we wrap up today, I'll just remind you, if you have any questions for us, to please drop those in the Q&A box. We haven't seen any come in so far, but we'll be happy to answer them as you submit them. And want to take this time to remind you that we have a number of resources that we hope you will use to engage in the legislative process. You've heard me reference our Bill Watch. Our Bill Watch list has been updated to essentially remove any of the bills that have not made their way through their respective deadlines to date. So that number of 64 is shown on our Bill Watch as of now. We have our legislative roster. That's a document that you can use to email legislators. At the bottom of that Excel sheet, there are tabs for many of the most relevant education budget and policy committees for your reference. So happy to have you grab those, as well as links on how to sign in for testimony, legislative cutoff calendars, and the legislative action planning tool that we've gone through before from WASA, WASDA, and WASBO. Also, just a reminder that TVW does live stream all of the programming that happens here at the legislature, that programming being floor debate, committee time, etc. So you're always able and welcome to watch from afar, from wherever you might be across the state, so that you're engaged in sort of civically seeing what your legislators are doing day in and day out over here in Olympia. Okay, I see a question. Thank you, Jim. Jim Kalikowski is asking just any updates on what might happen with TTK that's transitioned to kindergarten this session. Jim, we aren't exactly sure what's going to happen there at this point in time. We do know that that is obviously a budget conversation. And what I would sort of say that I think that depends on right now is what solutions might be viable or proposals might be viable, if you will, from our legislators as it relates to revenue. We have heard and seen references to what Democrats are calling the millionaire's tax. But we also know that that is not something that would fill any sort of immediate budget hole. That's sort of a down the line proposal. So, Jim, I think in terms of what cuts, if any, or how much cuts to TTK will be included in the budget will be dependent on revenue conversations and what are thinking about in terms of any short-term revenue options, all of which are details that we have not heard about to date. I do imagine we'll hear more and learn more about that during week 6. So hoping that we'll have a little bit more to share on that when we see you next week. Thank you for the question. Okay. I don't see any others at this time. Cynthia, is there anything that I missed or that you want to jump in to sort of share before we wrap today?
Yeah, I think one thing that I know was mentioned earlier is you'll see on our bill tracker that we have 64 bills, and some of those may be subject to come back, also known as the zombie bills. But we'll keep you posted if a bill does come back, and usually if a bill does, it's because it's from the Speaker of the House or the Senate Majority Leader. But I just wanted to give you all a heads up that we dropped from 141 bills to 64. And if any return, we will make sure to give you an update.
Thank you, Cynthia. With that, we will wrap for the purposes of week 5, February 13th. Please check out InSession, our written publication that'll be coming out this afternoon. And with that, we will see you back here on Zoom next Friday, February 20th. We will be post House of Origin cutoff by that time. So we will have many more details on some other bills. Thank you. We'll see you next week.